What if everything you've been told about communicating clearly is the very thing making you misunderstood? What if your silence, meant to de-escalate, is actually making her feel abandoned? Most people assume that if you're being honest and logical, the message should land the same way, no matter who you're talking to. But here's the truth no one tells you. Men and women aren't just wired differently. They're emotionally fluent in two completely different languages. They process safety, stress, and connection through entirely opposite systems. It's not that one is right and the other is wrong. It's that you're speaking different emotional dialects, with no translator in between. In the next few minutes, you'll uncover 8 invisible mismatches that quietly sabotage good relationships, and why your version of logic may be exactly what's making her feel unsafe, unseen, and disconnected. Once you understand these biological, emotional, and behavioral differences, you'll stop asking, "Why doesn't she get it?" and start seeing what she was really listening for all along. Stay with me. This isn't about choosing sides. It's about finally learning the language of connection. Here's the part most people never realize. When men are stressed, the best thing they know how to do is get quiet. Not because they don't care, but because they don't want to say something they'll regret. It's not rejection, it's protection. Let's understand how this exact thing unfolded between Emma and Ben. One evening, Emma came home exhausted. Her boss had humiliated her in front of the entire team. She was carrying the weight of the day on her shoulders, frustration, self-doubt, and a desperate need to feel understood. So, naturally, she turned to Ben, the one person she believed would make it all feel better. But as she began speaking, Ben simply nodded, got up, and walked into the other room. No hug, no comfort, no "I'm here for you," just silence. To Emma, that moment felt like abandonment, but to Ben it was something else entirely. Ben wasn't angry. He wasn't trying to punish her with silence. He was doing what he'd always done when stressed, pulling back to process alone. To him, that distance was respect. It was self-regulation. It was his way of saying, "Let me get my thoughts straight so I don't say the wrong thing." But Emma didn't hear that. She heard, "You're too much." And the silence became a wound. This is where so many couples go wrong. Men see solitude as a solution. Women feel connection as the cure. And when those needs clash without understanding, love starts to feel unsafe. But what if the silence wasn't the real problem? What if the real disconnect begins the moment one person starts speaking? Because while men withdraw to solve, women open up to heal. And if you've ever wondered why advice, even with the best intentions, somehow makes things worse, that's exactly what we're exploring next. Here's a truth most men never see coming. When a woman opens up about her problems, she's not always asking you to solve them. She's asking you to feel them with her. Because for many women, talking isn't about the answer. It's about the release. Let's go to Jason and Lily. It's late. Jason's just gotten home after a long day, ready to relax. But Lily is pacing in the kitchen. Something's clearly wrong. She starts talking about her colleague who keeps taking credit, about the passive-aggressive emails, about feeling invisible at work. Jason listens for a few moments, then cuts in. "Why don't you just confront her? Have you tried looping in your manager? You're overthinking it. Just let it go." To him, he's being supportive, efficient, logical. But to Lily, his words land like a dismissal. She's not looking for a shortcut to calm. She's looking for someone to step inside the storm with her, without flinching. Because for many women, talking is processing. It's how they untangle their day, lower their stress, and feel connected. In fact, studies show that verbal expression reduces cortisol levels in women. Just being heard, fully, without interruption, acts like emotional medicine. But when a man jumps to fix it, it can feel like he's trying to end the conversation, not hold space for it. And in that moment, she doesn't feel helped. She feels unseen. And if that invisible pain isn't understood, it can quietly grow. Because for the man, being helpful was his love language. But what happens when even love gets misinterpreted? That's where we go next, to a difference that strikes straight at the core of male identity. Why being corrected, even gently, can make a man feel unloved. Here's what most people don't realize. For many men, being useful isn't just about getting things done. It's how they feel worthy of love. Even well-meant corrections can quietly strip that feeling away. Now imagine this. He fixed the sink. She thanked him, and then pointed out the leak he missed. She thought she was being helpful. He felt like he wasn't enough. What do you think that moment turned into? A quiet, growing distance. This is the story of Rachel and Daniel. It was a typical Sunday afternoon. The kitchen sink had been dripping for days, and Rachel finally asked Daniel if he could take a look. Not one to usually do home repairs, Daniel gave it a shot. It took him 2 hours, a few YouTube tutorials, and a little cursing under his breath. But eventually the water flowed clean, and the drip was gone. Feeling proud, Daniel called out, "Hey, I think I fixed it." Rachel walked in, looked under the sink and smiled. "Nice job," she said, then paused. "But I think this pipe's still a little loose." She didn't mean harm. She thought she was helping, refining the job. But to Daniel, it landed differently. That small correction wiped away the pride he felt. He didn't hear good effort. He heard not good enough. Because for many men, feeling useful equals feeling valued. Even gentle corrections can feel like quiet withdrawals of respect. And when that happens repeatedly, something shifts inside. They stop showing up with effort, not because they don't care, but because they fear falling short. Now flip that dynamic. What happens when a woman opens her heart, not to be corrected or advised, but just to be held emotionally? That's what we explore next. A core emotional pattern in women that's often missed but deeply felt, the need to be heard, not fixed. Here's something many men miss, not out of carelessness, but instinct. When she opens up, she's not always asking you to solve her pain. She's asking you to stand beside it. Because to be heard without interruption or judgment is one of the deepest forms of emotional safety. Now, picture this. She opens up about a rough day. He listens, nods, then says, "Maybe next time, don't let it get to you." She goes quiet. He thinks he helped, but something in her shuts down. This is the story of Olivia and Matt. It had been a draining day for Olivia. Her project was rejected without reason. A colleague had made a sly comment in front of others. She was carrying that raw, invisible heaviness that only grows heavier when unspoken. When Matt came home, she didn't want advice. She didn't want solutions. She just needed to talk, to empty her heart into a safe space. And Matt listened, but the moment she paused, he replied, "Don't let it get to you. Just brush it off next time." That sentence, though, meant to comfort, stung. To Matt, he was being supportive, offering a path forward. But to Olivia, it felt like he skipped over her pain, like her emotions were a detour, not a destination worth stopping for. Because here's the truth. Talking is how many women regulate emotion. It's how they reconnect to themselves, and to those they trust. What she needed wasn't advice. It was a sentence as simple as, "That sounds incredibly frustrating. I'm really sorry you had to deal with that." Because in that one moment of empathy, something powerful happens. She feels safe. And where safety exists, connection grows. But when men rush to fix, even from love, they unintentionally send a signal that says, "You're too much." And that's where distance begins. But emotional safety isn't just about words, it's about consistency. Because while men often measure love in milestones, women feel it in the everyday moments. And that's what we explore next. Why grand gestures might not matter if the daily presence is missing. Here's where so many relationships quietly misfire. He's planning the grand gesture, while she's waiting for the small moment. One sees love in milestones, the other feels it in the everyday. Now imagine this. He surprises her with an expensive weekend getaway. She smiles, says thank you, and then softly adds, "But you haven't had dinner with me all week." He's stunned. "I planned all of this, and it's still not enough." This is the story of Jake and Emily. Jake had been drowning in deadlines. For weeks, his evenings were swallowed by work, and the time he spent with Emily became shorter, more distracted, and emotionally distant. Feeling guilty and wanting to make it up to her, Jake went big. He booked a romantic weekend escape, mountain views, spa reservations, her favorite wine waiting in the room, and when he revealed it, Emily's eyes lit up. But later that night, as they sat on the balcony, she said gently, "This means a lot. But honestly, I would have traded it for just one dinner this week. No phones, just you. Jake's heart sank. To him, love was effort, and this trip was effort. But to Emily, love meant presence, not just showing up big, but showing up often. Here's the invisible tension. Men are often conditioned to see love as an achievement, something you prove through action. But many women feel love through consistency. The text that says, "thinking of you," the hand on the back as they walk in the door, the kind glance across a crowded room. And when those love languages go unspoken, both sides end up feeling unappreciated. But this difference doesn't stop at expression. It reaches even deeper into how men and women emotionally recover from stress. Because what feels like space to him can feel like abandonment to her. Let's explore that next. Why men recharge in silence and women in connection. This is, honestly, one of the most misunderstood moments in any relationship, when one partner seeks closeness and the other disappears into silence. It's not rejection, it's a nervous system mismatch. Now picture this. It's quiet in the living room, too quiet. She's sitting on the couch, arms crossed. He's scrolling on his phone, totally zoned out. She's thinking, why is he shutting me out? He's thinking, finally, a moment to breathe. This is the quiet disconnect between Sarah and Chris. It had been a long, overwhelming day. Sarah's manager had piled on last-minute changes. The kids were moody. Everything just felt like it was pressing in on her. When Chris got home, she hoped he'd be her safe space, someone to help carry the weight. But Chris had already retreated. No words, just phone in hand, eyes glazed, shoulders sagging with fatigue. To Sarah, it felt like emotional absence. To Chris, it was the only way he knew how to reset. Here's why. Men and women are, well, biologically wired to regulate stress differently. Men tend to shut down external input to quiet their internal noise. Silence lowers cortisol, restores equilibrium. Women, on the other hand, talk through their stress. Emotional expression activates oxytocin and calms their system. So when she reaches out and he pulls away, it's not that he doesn't care. It's that their bodies are asking for two different forms of safety. The problem? He interprets her reach as pressure. She interprets his silence as indifference. But once this difference is understood, a new kind of connection becomes possible. Space without fear. Presence without force. But what happens when words themselves stop working? When he says exactly what he means, and she hears everything but that? That's where we go next. Into one of the most emotionally charged breakdowns in love. How the same words can mean entirely different things. This might be the most dangerous phrase in any relationship. It is saying, "I'm fine," because, sometimes it's not honesty, it's emotional code for "you're not hearing me." Now, just imagine this happening to you. You ask her, "Are you okay?" She says, "I'm fine." So you take a breath, feel a bit of relief, and turn back to your screen. Crisis averted. But 2 hours later, she's cold, distant, barely responding. You're confused, maybe even frustrated. But she said she was fine. Let's step into the story of Megan and Ryan. They'd had a small argument earlier. Nothing explosive, just that slow, subtle disconnection that builds when attention fades. Ryan had been glued to his phone. Megan felt like she was sitting in a room alone. Eventually, sensing the shift, Ryan looked up and asked, "Are you okay?" Megan replied, "I'm fine." So he nodded and let the moment pass. But to Megan, it didn't pass. It settled. Because when she said "I'm fine," what she really meant was, "I don't feel emotionally safe enough to open up. Because I'm not sure you'll hold what I say with care." This is where so many couples miss each other. Men tend to speak literally. If they say it, they mean it. Women often speak through emotional tone. If they say "I'm fine," but the tone wavers. That's the message. It's not manipulation. It's a different emotional operating system. So when Ryan took her words at face value, he missed the deeper signal. And she felt unseen. Because emotional fluency isn't just about what's said, it's about what's meant. But there's one final layer to this emotional disconnect. The aftermath. Because even after the words are said and the argument ends, one person moves on, the other holds on. That's where we go next. Why men seek resolution and women seek repair. The argument finally ends. He breathes a sigh of relief, thinking, good, it's over. But she's still withdrawn, quiet, unsettled. And he wonders, why can't she just move on? This is the story of Laura and Adam. They had a fight the night before. Voices were raised, emotions spilled over, and eventually, they stopped talking. The next morning, Adam made coffee, cracked a light joke at breakfast, and assumed they were back to normal. But Laura barely looked up from her plate. She wasn't holding a grudge. She just hadn't healed yet. Because here's the fundamental difference. Men often seek resolution, a clear end to conflict, so everything can move forward. But women often need emotional repair, a feeling that the bond is safe again, that the emotional wound has actually been acknowledged. To Adam, saying, let's forget it, felt like maturity. To Laura, it felt like erasure. She needed a moment of empathy, not silence. She needed to hear, I didn't mean to hurt you, that wasn't my intention. Are you okay now? Without that emotional closure, the fight may be over. But the hurt still lingers, like background noise in the relationship. And the longer it goes unspoken, the more distance it creates. This final difference is often the reason couples argue about the same thing over and over again. Not because the issue is unresolved, but because the pain around it was never truly seen. Now that we've uncovered these 8 emotional patterns, what does it all add up to? Let's bring it back to where we started, to the silence, the logic, and the love that got lost in translation. So why does all of this create so much friction, even in relationships filled with love? Because men and women aren't ignoring each other. They're simply tuned to different emotional frequencies. Men see emotions as problems to fix. Women see premature solutions as emotional neglect. At the heart of this is not just culture, it's biology. Under stress, a man's brain floods with testosterone and activates the amygdala, triggering a need for action, resolution, or withdrawal. Meanwhile, a woman's brain releases more oxytocin, the hormone tied to bonding and connection. Her stress response pushes her to talk, connect, and be seen. So while he's trying to fix the silence, she's trying to heal through it. But what if neither one is wrong? What if, all along, it wasn't about who's right, but about learning to speak each other's emotional language? Because once you realize that, you stop arguing over what was said and start listening for what was really meant. That's where everything begins to change. You start asking, do you want me to listen or help? You start appreciating quiet without guilt and conversation without solving. You start replacing blame with curiosity and distance with understanding. Like Anna and Tom, a couple who once fought weekly over not being heard. Until one day, Tom asked her mid-conversation, wait, do you want advice right now, or just for me to sit with you? Anna smiled through her tears and said, just sit. That's all I ever needed. That moment didn't solve everything, but it shifted everything. Because understanding isn't just about logic. It's about learning to listen for what the heart is trying to say, even when the words haven't found their way out yet. And that's why men's logic often fails. Because what women are really listening for is connection. He said exactly what he meant. She heard everything but that. We began with a silence, the kind that drifts in when logic fails and connection feels out of reach. But now we know, they weren't ignoring each other, just speaking different emotional languages. Men seek clarity, women seek emotional safety, and when we stop trying to win the conversation, we finally start to understand the one we love. Men aren't wrong for being logical, women aren't wrong for being emotional, but we are wrong when we forget that love isn't about being right. It's about being understood. So maybe next time she says I'm fine or he pulls away without a word, you won't rush to fix. You'll pause and listen, not just to the words, but to the feeling beneath them. What's one moment where miscommunication pulled you and someone apart? Share it below, because your story might be the bridge someone else is searching for. At Metanoia, we're not just here to help you understand your patterns, we're here to help you transform through them. If this video made you feel seen, or helped you understand someone just a little better, like it, share it, or simply send it to someone you care about. Because sometimes healing starts with a conversation, and this might be the one. Thanks for being here. And most of all, thanks for still showing up.